As the NBA playoffs continue, things just continue to get more and more interesting. But there's only one real place to start here, right? Knicks-Pacers game 2. This series more and more feels like it's just going to be an all-time classic series because the Knicks this season are just not allowed to play boring playoff games. Every game that they're in has to result in days and days of discourse about the officiating and about whether or not the NBA wants them to advance and potentially play the Celtics in the conference finals. Every game has to have a conversation about, hey, who's the new New York Knick that now got hurt and might not play in the next game? Hey, Josh Hart played 48 minutes again. Every single game they play, there has to be a ton of conversation about afterwards. Those are just the rules. In this one, Knicks-Pacers game 2, it had everything, right? I mean, the Knicks get off to a great start. The Pacers come back, and the Knicks make their run. We've got Brunson getting hurt in the middle of the game. It's weird to look at the box score these days and see Jalen Brunson playing only 32 minutes. And the only explanation is exactly what happened. He got hurt in the middle of the game. The Knicks really kind of started to fall apart without him out there. They were able to actually score decently well, but Indiana was just so good offensively. They would come back in the game. And there's two main storylines to the series right now for me as the Knicks now go up 2-0. By the way, I don't think the series is over by a long shot. I really like Indiana, especially at home. I think there's a real chance that we go back to Game 5 MSG and it's 2-2 in the series. Two storylines so far, though, for me. The Knicks injury stuff continues to get weird, and then the officiating, which we're going to talk about here in a second. OG Anunoby, who was fantastic in this game, gets hurt in the middle of the game. Before the game, it's announced, or maybe a day or two before the game, Mitchell Robinson is going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. He's out, obviously, for the series. Brunson gets hurt in the middle of the game, and this is a team that's already missing Julius Randle and Bogdanovic, who's out for the year, got hurt last series. So we're talking about a banged-up Jalen Brunson. We're talking about missing Bogdanovic, missing Randle, missing OG, missing Mitchell Robinson, and the one guy, or one of the two guys that's still left over, it's not DiVincenzo, and then Josh Hart, who plays 48 minutes every single game. He's played every minute of every game in back-to-back, really competitive, high-intensity playoff games. So going into Game 3, this is what the lineup could look like for the Knicks. A banged up Jalen Brunson, who is basically wearing gloves at this point because he's got so many different things wrapped up on his hands. We got Dante DiVincenzo. Josh Hart has played 48 minutes in back-to-back games. We've got Miles McBride, who's probably going to start now, and Isaiah Hartenstein. Off the bench, we've got Precious Achiuwa and Alec Burks. Those are the New York Knicks right now. A New York Knicks team that is 2 wins away from making the conference finals. That's their roster. They don't play more than 7 guys. I'd be shocked if we see anybody other than those 7 guys. And we're going to get like some important Alec Burks minutes. That's where we're at right now with the Knicks. And the conversation around this, of course, points to, well, is this their own fault? Is it the fault of Tibbs for playing these guys so many minutes during the regular season, then obviously to this point in the postseason? It's been a conversation after every single game. Like, yes, you're winning and it's fantastic. Great first round series against Philly. But at what point does this become untenable? At what point is this no longer sustainable to play your guys 42, 43 minutes a game, to have such a short rotation, to play 15 minutes of guys off the bench, basically? And on one hand, yes, that could absolutely be a contributing factor to something like OG Anunoby pulling his hamstring, right? Absolutely. On the other hand, when you look at the roster now, what exactly was Tom Thibodeau's choice? I mean, Precious Achiuwa was actually awesome in Game 2, but they clearly lost faith in him. They got Alec Burks over there. Bogey's hurt. Like, they're missing 4 or 5 of their top 10 guys. So yes, it maybe is kind of a negative that these guys got hurt potentially as a result of them playing so many minutes, but like, they were pretty much out of players. And by the way, they keep winning the basketball games, which also feels important. The other part of this as well that needs to be discussed, Rick Carlisle certainly thinks it needs to be discussed. The officiating in this series so far has been interesting to say the least. We talked about this the last time we talked about Knicks Pacers in Game 1, the illegal screen towards the end of the game. Rick Carlisle's unhappy. They're submitting, what is it, 70, almost 80 calls or something between Games 1 and 2 they don't like. And, after the game, Rick Carlisle shared his thoughts.
Small market teams deserve an equal shot. They deserve a fair shot, no matter where they're playing. Anybody else?
So he's probably going to get fined for that, but he probably knew that at the time. Here's what I would say about the officiating to this point. There have certainly been some subjective calls that have gone against Indiana that you could argue the other way. We talked about that in Game 1 with the illegal screen, right? But I think the larger issue is there have been some non-subjective calls that have gone against each team. Some of the out-of-bounds calls have been very, very iffy. There's kickball violations that haven't been called correctly. There's like an officiating issue, not necessarily like, oh, that's a judgment call, whether that's a foul or not. It's just not officiating the game correctly, not enforcing the rules correctly on certain plays. That I think that's arguably more frustrating than anything else. Like, yeah, everybody could argue this is a foul, that's a foul, you slow it down 100 times. In real time, it's hard to call that stuff. but you have to be able to get the out-of-bounds stuff right. You have to be able to get the kickball stuff right, especially in close games. And for whatever reason, in all these Knicks games, it hasn't just gone against Indiana. It's been on both sides, maybe a little bit more heavily swayed towards the Pacers, but especially in MSG so far this postseason, the officiating has been really, really bad. But I would say this to any Indiana fan or the Pacers themselves is maybe upset about the officiating. If you had to choose between one of the two things, okay, let's just assume that the officiating has been more on the side of the Knicks so far in the series. I think that is easily an argument. Would you rather have 4 or 5 of your top 10 players in your rotation not be able to play in game 3? That's where the Knicks are at. Or would you rather have a bit of a disadvantage in the officiating in games 1 and 2 moving through the rest of the series? Essentially what I'm saying is, if you argue that the officiating has been against Indiana so far in the series, you could certainly make that argument. It's not like the Pacers are the only team playing at a disadvantage here. Like, both teams are dealing with stuff. The injury stuff for the Knicks is just out of control. And I personally would rather have a little bit of a disadvantage in the officiating and still have most of my players, although certainly Indiana is dealing with injuries as well, rather than, the other way around. And the frustrating thing for Indiana, of course, to this point is they had a real chance to go up 2-0 in this series, certainly at least to split one of the games in MSG. And once that happens, it completely changes everything about the series, because now if you're the Pacers, you go into game 3 at home, like, this is your season. You have to win this basketball game. If you don't win game 3, your season's over. No one's ever come back from down 3-0, certainly not without home court advantage, or you're going to have much of a chance the rest of the series either. Whereas if you split one of these, it's okay to split one at home and just let the series continue on. And as it progresses, maybe you continue to get healthier. You kind of figure out the other team a little bit. But now everything is on the line for game 3 for Indiana. Last thing on Knicks Pacers that I want to throw out there before we move on. This kind of blew my mind. I saw this one come across the timeline. And it's not like I remember Carmelo Anthony having a ton of amazing playoff moments with the Knicks, but they had a couple of decent runs there. And it feels like Jalen Brunson just got there. And obviously he's had incredible scoring performances so far in the postseason. For him to already have more playoff points for the Knicks than Melo ever did kind of broke my brain. But now let's talk about Thunder Mavs. It's about game 1, but it's also just kind of about the series as a whole, right? Big takeaway for me so far, Luka is just clearly not healthy. Something's going on with that guy. It was happening in the first round against the Clippers as well. Something's going on with his knee. He's turning the ball over a ton. He's almost exclusively shooting step back threes now, and he's clearly just not healthy. And obviously for Dallas, that's a huge detriment to their possibilities of winning the series, doing anything in the postseason, and it doesn't seem like something that's going to get better anytime soon. He's not going to miss any of the games. I mean, maybe they sit him for game 2, but that seems unlikely. And I mean, the supporting cast has been pretty solid, right? PJ Washington's had some good games. Kyrie's been awesome in a couple of these games. But the Thunder are too good for them to not have full-strength Luka Doncic out there, and it's just really, really concerning for the rest of the series for them. But if you look at game 1 specifically, I think the Thunder have been kind of overlooked really throughout the season, but also in the playoffs. I mean, they haven't lost yet. They obviously had a little bit of a shaky game 1 against New Orleans, but they have this kind of label on them right now is, oh, they're just this young team. They haven't had any playoff experience. What are they really going to do? There's other teams in the West that other teams or other, people like better. I don't know, man. OKC's really good. Jalen Williams, especially this team at home. Jalen Williams is really good. SGA is a top 3 MVP guy this year. Chet has been fantastic for them. They have all this depth. Aaron Wiggins is out there doing stuff in game 1 for them. They just can try stuff with all these different options that they have. Their coach is fantastic. And I see no reason to believe, apart from Minnesota just becoming this absolute juggernaut team in the middle of the playoffs, I see no reason to believe that the Thunder can't make the finals this year. I mean, that's where I'm at with them. And the really impressive thing about that for them is, one, they just became the youngest team ever to win a playoff series. Yes, they are extremely young. That's absolutely a thing. And for them to be able to continue to exceed those expectations despite their youth is really impressive. But also, as we've always talked about, they've still got all these picks as well. They're one of 2 teams left in the postseason of the 8 teams left in the playoffs that have full control over every single one of their picks moving on into the future. And then obviously they have extra first-round picks as well. 6 of the other 8 teams have had to spend first-round picks to add players to their team to get to this point. The Pacers had to trade for Pascal Siakam. The Mavs had to trade for the guys they did at the deadline, and then in addition, Kyrie Irving in the past. The Nuggets are still owing picks for Aaron Gordon. You go on and on and on throughout the list. Of course, the Timberwolves with Rudy Gobert. On and on and on throughout the list. It's them. And then, by the way, the New York Knicks had full control over all of their first-round picks, partially because they had some extra ones they were able to use in some of these deals, and also because they were to get OG Anunoby at the deadline without giving up a first-round pick. And it's just so impressive, and I feel like something that isn't being talked about enough, how good the Thunder are, how good they are relative to their youth, and how well they are still set up for the future. The fact that they could legitimately make the conference finals or the finals as the youngest team in league history to ever win a playoff series, and then go into the offseason and still have such an opportunity to improve is an unbelievable accomplishment for them. Now, certainly the series is not over. I'm always going to be afraid of Luka and Kyrie in that combination, but as of right now, I just wanted to kind of establish it. It kind of feels like people are underrating the Thunder a bit. Going back to the East, though, really quick. Not really worth discussing Cavs-Celtics game 1 too much. Donovan Mitchell scored well. Celtics are a better team even without KP. I don't expect that to be a very long series. But there's been some conversation lately around Jayson Tatum, because so far in the postseason, if you just looked at his scoring numbers and his shooting from the field, especially from 3, you'd be kind of wondering what's happening with Jayson Tatum here. Like, they need this guy in an eventual potential final series against a team like Minnesota, Denver, OKC. Like, they need Jayson Tatum to be at least kind of close to the best player in the series, so they're not at such a disadvantage there. What's happening with him? Why is he not scoring well? Couple of things. One, I think he started to find a little bit more of a happy medium with being this like all-around player, especially in this roster construction. It makes more sense when KP's out there. Obviously, he's not out there right now, but like, hey, Jaylen Brown, you go score. Hey, Derek White, you guard and you hit threes. Drew Holiday, you guard, hit an occasional 3. KP will feed you in the post. And Tatum's just like, I'll rebound, I'll facilitate, I'll score when I need to, but he's just kind of filling in the gaps right now. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing for Boston, because when you look at a lot of the stuff, a lot of the advanced numbers, like, he's still playing extremely well. It's just he's not hitting some of those step back 3s. He's not scoring as well. And for them to still be as dominant as they have been, even without KP obviously in game 1, and him not scoring well, just adds another layer to the ceiling possibly of the Celtics moving forward in the playoffs. And I think there's going to be a lot of conversation if he continues to struggle to score a little bit around some of these numbers. But I'm not particularly concerned, at least not yet. I expect him to figure it out as the postseason rolls along, and if they do meet a potential, Nuggets team in the finals, Timberwolves team in the finals, OKC, Dallas, whatever the case may be, if they meet one of those teams, I fully expect that he's going to have to turn it on a little bit more and find a little bit more scoring. But right now, I think he's just kind of finding his way in terms of impacting the game in other ways. And it's really interesting because you'd think that there would be a lot of pressure on him to go out there and score and go out there and be really aggressive. But it doesn't really seem like he's feeling that right now. A couple more things here, non-playoff related. Rudy Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year. Congrats to him. There was some conversation about maybe Victor Wembanyama would be the Defensive Player of the Year. I feel like every other day I see a post now about how Anthony Davis is being disrespected in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. Gobert certainly deserves the award. Certainly now that you see what Minnesota's doing in the postseason, one of the more dominant defenses that we've seen over the last handful of seasons. And I mean, the conversation is going to be had about, is Rudy Gobert a Hall of Famer? He absolutely is. You can't win as many Defensive Player of the Year awards as Gobert has and not be a Hall of Famer. You can not like him as a player. You can talk about past playoff failures. Maybe you don't like him as a person. That's fine. But if you're talking about his Hall of Fame candidacy, he's absolutely going to make it. Speaking of Hall of Fame candidacy, Nikola Jokic, just probably one of the quieter MVPs anyone's ever won. He's now a 3-time winner of the MVP, which puts him on an extremely short list. Winning 3 MVPs in the NBA doesn't really happen that often. Puts you into fantastic historical company, and that is now where Nikola Jokic finds himself. Now, obviously, it's going to be a little bit bittersweet if they lose in the second round of the playoffs, and then there's going to be all these conversations about, oh, is Jokic actually good? Was the Nuggets team last year actually that good? We're not quite there yet, but it's interesting that things seem to be going so negatively for the Nuggets right now in the postseason, yet, of course, Jokic is going to win the MVP. A couple other guys in the conversation there. Luka kind of made a late run. SGA was up there as well. But it really felt like once Embiid got hurt, Jokic continued to play as well as he was. This was kind of his award to lose, and obviously that's how it worked out. And that's everything that's been happening in the NBA recently. I'll see you next time.